Σεβασμιότατε, κύριε Γενική Πρόξενε της Αρμοστίας της Κύπρου, κύριε Πρόξενε της Ελληνικής Δημοκρατίας, εκλεκτοί παρευρισκόμενοι, σας καλωσορίζω θερμά στην απόψινή εκδήλωση που διοργανώνει η Αρχιεπισκοπή Θυατείρων και Μεγάλης Βρετανίας. Είναι ιδιαίτερη χαρά και τιμή για όλους εμάς στο Ελληνικό Κέντρο να υποστηρίζουμε έμπρακτα και φέτος, όπως κάθε χρόνο, κατά την τελευταία 15ετία των εορτασμών των ελληνικών και χριστιανικών γραμμάτων. Η απόψινή διάλεξη από τον Δόκτωρα Πέτρο Σαρή θα είναι στα αγγλικά. For the non-Greek audience, you'll be pleased to hear that tonight's talk is in English. So, can you please switch off your mobile phones and let's welcome Mr. Παναγιώτης Τοφή.
Σεβασμιότατε Αρχιεπίσκοπε Θυατείρων και Μεγάλης Βρετανίας, κύριε Γρηγόριε, Θεοφιλέστατη, εντιμότατε κύριε Πρόξενε της Ελλάδας, κύριε Δεμέστιχα, εντιμότατε κύριε Γενικέ Πρόξενε της Κυπριακής Δημοκρατίας, κύριε Γεωργίου, ευλογημότατε καθηγητά, κύριε Σαρή, εντιμολογιότατε κύριε Πρόεδρε των Ελληνοορθοδόξων Κοινοτήτων Μεγάλης Βρετανίας, κύριε Μιναΐδη, σεβαστοί πατέρες, αγαπητοί προσκεκλημένοι. Σας καλωσορίζω εκ μέρους της Ιεράς Αρχιεπισκοπής Θυατείρων και Μεγάλης Βρετανίας στην απόψινή εκδήλωση για να τιμήσουμε τη μνήμη των Τριών Ιεραρχών και Οικουμενικών Διδασκάλων, Βασιλείου του Μεγάλου, Ιωάννου του Χρυσοστόμου και Γρηγορίου του Θεολόγου, και επίσης για να τιμήσουμε τα ελληνικά και χριστιανικά γράμματα που καθιερώθηκε να εορτάζονται με αυτούς τους μεγάλους πατέρες της Εκκλησίας μας. Χάρη στη δράση τους, η σύζευξη του ελληνικού και του χριστιανικού πνεύματος των δύο αυτών οικουμενικών μεγεθών σημάδεψε οριστικά την πορεία της χριστιανοσύνης και ολόκληρης της ανθρωπότητας. Ως προτεργάτες του πνεύματος και λαμπρά παραδείγματα σοφίας και αρετής, συνέβαλαν στην ενδυνάμωση της χριστιανικής θεολογίας, δίδαξαν με το έργο και το λόγο τους, βοήθησαν τους ενδεείς και άπορους, διαμόρφωσαν το πλαίσιο της αρετής και της πίστης για τον κάθε χριστιανό και για τον κάθε άνθρωπο. Η απόψινή εκδήλωση περιλαμβάνει ύμνους από τη χοροδία της Σχολής Βυζαντινής Μουσικής της Ιεράς Αρχιεπισκοπής, χαιρετισμούς από τους εντιμότατους προξένους και από το σεβασμιότατο Αρχιεπίσκοπο Θυατείρων και Μεγάλης Βρετανίας, ομιλία από τον διακεκριμένο καθηγητή κύριο Πέτρο Σαρή, Fellow of Trinity College στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Cambridge, με θέμα Ορθοδοξία, Ελληνισμός και Χριστιανική Μαρτυρία στον 21ο αιώνα, καθώς επίσης και χορούς από το χορευτικό συγκρότημα του Λυκείου των Ελληνίδων. Αρχίζοντας τη σημερινή μας εκδήλωση, η χοροδία της Σχολής Βυζαντινής Μουσικής της Αρχιεπισκοπής, υπό τη διεύθυνση του πρωτοπρεσβύτερου πατρός Ιωσήφ Παλιούρα, θα αποδώσει ύμνους προς τους τρεις μεγίστους φωστήρας της Τρισηλίου Θεότητος.
Amen.
Ευχαριστούμε τη χοροδία για την άρτια εκτέλεση των ύμνων. Στη συνέχεια, ο Θεοφιλέστατος Επίσκοπος Κιαναίων, κύριος Χρυσόστομος, θα αναγνώσει το μήνυμα της αυτού Θεοτάτης Παναγιότητας του Οικουμενικού Πατριάρχου Κυρίου Βαρθολομαίου.
Εορτή Αρχιεπισκόπε Θυατείρων και Μεγάλης Βρετανίας, υπέρτιμε και εξ Αρχαιοδυτικής Ευρώπης και Ιρλανδίας, εν Αγίο Πνεύματι αγαπητέ αδερφέ και συλλειτουργία της ημών μετριότητος, Κύριε Γρηγόριε, χάρις ή τη μετέρα ιερότητη και ειρήνη παρά Θεού. Εν πρώτης επιθυμούμεν, είναι δια των μεταχείρες πατριαρχικών ημών αδελφικών γραμμάτων, συγχαρώ με Φιλαδέλφος και εκ μέσης καρδίας τη μετέρα αγαπητή και φιλοθέω ιερότητη, και επευκαιρία των ετησίως οργανωμένων υπό της καθημάς Ιεράς Αρχιεπισκοπής πολυημέρων εορταστικών εκδηλώσεων για τους τρεις ιεράρχας και την ελληνοχριστιανική παιδεία. Η ανασχόληση μετά της διδασκαλίας των τριών μεγίστων τούτων φωστήρων της Εκκλησίας ημών, βιωματικός εχόντων πείρα Θεού, πολλούς δύναται να αποφέρει καρπούς, καθότι ούτι απετέλεσαν στήλους της Ορθοδοξίας, άνδρας θεόθεπεμθέντας εν καιρής δυσχεμέρης προς προάσπιση της από των αιρέσεων κινδυνευούσης ευαγγελικής αληθείας, αλλά και πηξίδας δια την εν Χριστώ ζωή και την ερμηνεία και βίωση της ζωοποιού διδασκαλίας του Κυρίου και των Αποστόλων. Το μήνυμα των Τριών Ιεραρχών περί της εν Χριστώ παιδείας και καλλιεργίας, η οποία έχει σκοπό τη σωτηρία και τελείωση του ανθρώπου, καθίσταται εξαιρετικώς επίκαιρον σήμερον, εποχή κατά την οποία, εν μέσω ποικίλων δραματικών γεγονότων και συγκρούσεων, το σούτον μεγάλην ανάγκη έχουμε να λυθούς παιδείας των ψυχών, ώστε αύτε και συναφώς και ανθρώπινη κοινωνία να οδηγηθούν στην Ευαγγελική ειρήνη, για την οποία ο πολύπλανκτος και εναγής προκάτοχος της ημών μετριότητος Γρηγόριος ο Ναζιαζινός, πολλά υπηνεγκών και παθών έγραφεν: «Ειρήνη φίλοι, το γλυκύ και πράγμα και όνομα, ειρήνη φίλοι, το παραπάντων μεν επαινούμεν αγαθών, υπολείμεν δε φυλασσόμενον, πότε άπελπης ημάς και πότε επανοίξεις ημίν». Λόγος περί ειρήνης. Όθεν με τευαρεσκίας επληροφορήθη με την έναρξη των εν λόγων εκδηλώσεων κατά την εορτή του Αγίου Γρηγορίου του Θεολόγου και την κορύφωσιν αυτών κατά την κοινή εορτή των Αγίων την 30η Ιανουαρίου για τις ομιλίες του ευλογημοτάτου καθηγητού δόκτωρος Πέτρου Σαρή, και ευχόμεθα, ιερότατε και πολύτιμε αδελφέ, όπως ο Πανάγαθος Κύριος ημών, τες πρεσβείες των τιμωμένων Τριών Αγίων Ιεραρχών, ευλογήσει πλουσιοπαρόχος και τας πραγματοποιηθισομένας επί τη ευκαιρία ταύτη εκδηλώσεις και ομιλίες, και χαρίζεται το ποιμνίο ημών πάσαν άνωθεν αγαθή δόσιν και σοφίαν, πέδευσιν και σύνεσιν διώνε κόσμουν εαυτούς οι Άγιοι. Επί δε τούτης, κατασπαζόμενοι φιλαδέλφος την ημετέραν περινουστάτην ιερότητα, επικαλούμεθα επ' αυτήν και επί πάντας τους συνεορτάζοντας την χάριν και το άπειρον έλεος του Θεού. 2015 Ιανουαρίου 20, ο Κωνσταντινούπολος αγαπητός εν Χριστώ αδελφός Βαρθολομαίος.
Στη συνέχεια, παρακαλούμε τον εντιμότατο πρόξενο της Ελλάδας, κύριο Σωτήριο Δεμέστιχα, να απευθύνει σύντομο χαιρετισμό.
Σεβασμιότατε, εντιμότατε Γενικέ Πρόξενε, Θεοφιλέστατε Κιανέων, Θεοφιλέστατε Τροπαίου, αγαπητοί φίλοι, χρόνια πολλά. Είναι μια μεγάλη μέρα σήμερα για όλους μας, γιατί μας θυμίζει τη σημασία της παιδείας ως θεμέλιο για κάθε κοινωνία. Όλα τα κράτη τα οποία έχουν προοδεύσει δώσανε σημασία στην παιδεία και ίσως και εμείς, που τώρα περνάμε μια δύσκολη ώρα, αν την είχαμε προσέξει περισσότερο, θα ήμασταν καλύτερα. Εδώ πέρα στο Λονδίνο έχουμε την τύχη να υποστηριζόμεθα στο εκπαιδευτικό έργο από τις εκπαιδευτικές αποστολές Ελλάδος και Κύπρου, οι οποίες αναπτύσσουν τεράστιο έργο, για το οποίο είμαι όλοι ευτυχείς. Η μέρα όμως σήμερα μας θυμίζει και κάτι άλλο. Μας θυμίζει την άρρηκτη σχέση μεταξύ του Ελληνισμού και της Ορθοδοξίας. Διότι δεν θα μιλούσαμε σήμερα ελληνικά εάν τα χρόνια της σκλαβιάς δεν υπήρχαν κάποιοι άνθρωποι, ιεράρχες και απλός κλήρος, να γυρνάνε σε ολόκληρη την Ελλάδα, τον ελληνικό χώρο, και να μιλάνε για την αξία της μόρφωσης και να ανοίγουν σχολεία, όπως είναι η περίπτωση του Κοσμά του Αιτωλού, του πατρό Κοσμά, ο οποίος το 18ο αιώνα είχε δραστηριοποιηθεί στη Ρούμελη, δηλαδή στη στερεά Ελλάδα και την Ήπειρο, και στο τέλος, όπως ξέρουμε όλοι, κρεμάστηκε από τους Τούρκους βέβαια. Άρα λοιπόν αυτή η πραγματικότητα, αυτή η ιστορική πραγματικότητα εξηγεί για ποιο λόγο υπάρχει αυτός ο ακλόνητος δεσμός μεταξύ του ελληνισμού και της Ορθοδοξίας, που καμιά φορά είναι δύσκολο να τον εξηγήσουμε στους ξένους συνομιλητές μας, αλλά εμείς οι ίδιοι τον γνωρίζουμε καλά. Όπως ξέρετε, είχαμε εκλογές και έχουμε ήδη μια νέα κυβέρνηση. Άρα, η ευχή όλων είναι τα στελέχη της νέας κυβέρνησης να έχουν τη δύναμη και τη σοφία που απαιτείται για να μπορέσουμε να δούμε πάλι τον ελληνικό λαό σε συνθήκες ανάπτυξης και προκοπής. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Ευχαριστούμε τον εντιμότατο κύριο Πρόξενο για τα λόγια του. Παρακαλούμε τον εντιμότατο Γενικό Πρόξενο της Κύπρου, κύριο Γεώργιο Γεωργίου, να απευθύνει σύντομο χαιρετισμό.
Έντιμε κύριε Γενική Πρόξενε της Ελλάδος, να μου επιτρέψετε να μεταφέρω και τις ευχές της Κυπριακής Δημοκρατίας, έτσι ώστε η νέα ελληνική κυβέρνηση να πετύχει στους στόχους και τους σκοπούς που έθεσε, έτσι ώστε, όπως έχετε πει, ο ελληνικός λαός να οδηγηθεί σε δρόμο ανάπτυξης και ευημερίας. Αξιότιμε κύριε Σαρή, Θεοφιλέστατη, Τροπαίου και Κιαναίων, κύριε Πρόεδρε του Συνδέσμου Ελληνοορθοδόξων Κοινοτήτων, αγαπητοί προϊσταμένοι της Κυπριακής Εκπαιδευτικής Αποστολής, σεβαστοί πατέρες, φίλοι και φίλες. Καταρχάς, να μου επιτρέψετε να ευχηθώ χρόνια πολλά, υγεία και δύναμη με την ευκαιρία της ονομαστικής του εορτής στον σεβασμιότατο Αρχιεπίσκοπο Θυατείρων κύριο Γρηγόριο, ένα ιδιαίτερο σεβαστό και αγαπητό ιεράρχη, ο οποίος υπηρετεί την Εκκλησία εδώ στο Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο για πάνω από 50 χρόνια. Την υπηρετεί με αξιοθαύμαστο χριστιανικό ζήλο, ταπεινότητα και αυταπάρνηση. Είμαι σχεδόν στο ήμιση της ηλικίας του σεβασμιωτάτου και δεν πιστεύω να έχω την ενέργεια και τις δυνάμεις του να διασχίζω το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο από τη μια άκρη μέχρι την άλλη, κάτι το οποίο πράττει διαρκώς, έτσι ώστε να διασφαλίσει την οντότητα της χριστιανικής Ορθόδοξης Εκκλησίας σε αυτές τις νήσους και όχι μόνο για το παρόν, αλλά να διασφαλίσει την ισχυρή παρουσία τους εις το μέλλον. Σεβασμιότατε, υγεία, δύναμη, χρόνια πολλά να σας δίνει ο Θεός και προσωπικά το θεωρώ τιμή και προνόμιο που σας γνώριζα, που με ευλογήσετε και μου δώσατε τις ευχές σας. Θα ήθελα να μεταφέρω καταρχάς τις απολογίες και του είπα του αρμοστή, ο οποίος είχε μια ηλυμμένη υποχρέωση από καιρών αναληφθήσαν, την οποία δεν μπορούσε να ακυρώσει ούτε να αναβάλει. Απολογείται και σας διαβιάζει τους θερμούς χαιρετισμούς του. Θα ήθελα να πω σε αυτόν τον σύντομο χαιρετισμό ότι η εορτή των Τριών Ιεραρχών κατέχει δικαίως ξεχωριστή θέση στο εορτολόγιο της Εκκλησίας μας και ευστόχως η Αρχιεπισκοπή Θυατείρων και Μεγάλης Βρετανίας έχει καθιερώσει την διοργάνωση ειδικής εκδήλωσης προς τιμή τους τα τελευταία 25, αν δεν κάνω λάθος, χρόνια. Ο Βασίλειος ο Μέγας, περισσότερα λέει ο Σεβασμιότατος, ο Βασίλειος ο Μέγας, ο Ιωάννης ο Χρυσόστομος και ο Γρηγόριος ο Θεολόγος δεν υπήρξαν μόνο τρεις φωτεινές μορφές του χριστιανισμού, αλλά και τρεις αξεπέραστοι μεταλαμπαδευτές του πλούσιου ελληνικού πνεύματος. Συντέριαξαν τον βαθύ πλούτο που πρόσφερε η γνώση των κλασσικών σπουδών με την πίστη στο Θεό και τον Λόγο Του. Έφεραν σε επαφή και έδεσαν σε αρμονία την κλασσική παιδεία με τον χριστιανισμό. Δεν υπήρξαν μόνο θεολόγοι και ιεροκήρυκες, αλλά διδάσκαλοι και παιδαγωγοί. Δικαίως λοιπόν η γιορτή τους τιμάται και ως γιορτή των γραμμάτων και καθόλου τυχαία είναι που η μνήμη τους τιμάται πέραν των θρησκευτικών πλαισίων και από ακαδημαϊκούς και βέβαια από τα σχολεία μας. Στη σύγχρονη εποχή, μια εποχή των άκρων και των υπερβολών, του άκρατου καταναλωτισμού, του ατομικισμού και της αποθέωσης του πλούτου, της ισοπαίδωσης αρχών και αξιών και πολιτισμικών ταυτοτήτων, αλλά ταυτόχρονα της μεγάλης φτώχειας, των επιδημιών, της δυστυχίας, της εξαθλίωσης και των πολέμων, η διδασκαλία των Τριών Ιεραρχών παραμένει επίκαιρη. Διότι αυτοί δεν δίδαξαν μόνο γράμματα, αλλά δίδαξαν και φιλανθρωπία και κοινωνική συνείδηση. Πλούσιος εστί ουκ ο πολλά κεκτημένος, αλλά ο πολλά διδούς, φέρεται να λέει ο Ιωάννης ο Χρυσόστομος. Στο σύγχρονο λοιπόν κόσμο, όπου η πιο ακραία αντίθεση είναι ίσως η άκρατη κλειδί από τη μια και η χωρίς όρια εξαθλίωση από την άλλη, η συμπυκνωμένη σοφία της ελληνικής παιδείας και της χριστιανικής διδασκαλίας στέκει φάρος φωτεινός. Σήμερα, όσο ποτέ άλλοτε, ο άνθρωπος έχει ανάγκη να γαλουχηθεί από τις διαχρονικές αξίες της αλληλεγγύης και της κοινωνικής δικαιοσύνης, του αγαπάτε αλλήλους που μας μετέδωσε ο χριστιανισμός, αλλά και της δημοκρατίας και της βαθιάς φιλοσοφικής αναζήτησης και έρευνας που ξεπήδησε από την κλασική Ελλάδα. Αυτά τα διαχρονικά μηνύματα συνέζεξαν, εναρμόνισαν και δίδαξαν σε ολόκληρο τον τότε γνωστό κόσμο οι τρεις μεγάλοι διδάσκαλοι. Η ανάδειξή τους και η περαιτέρω εμπόδοση και μετάδοσή τους αποτελεί σήμερα προτεραιότητα για τον κάθε καλώς σκεπτόμενο άνθρωπο και πραγματική τιμή στο πρόσωπο των τριών αυτών Αγίων Πατέρων της Εκκλησίας, αλλά και αυτής καθ' αυτής της ακατάληπτης χριστιανικής μας πίστεως και αιωνίου θρησκευτικής παραδόσεως. Με αυτές τις σκέψεις χαιρετίζω την απόψινή εκδήλωση εκ μέρους της Κυπριακής Υπάτης Αρμοστίας και με μεγάλο ενδιαφέρον αναμένω και βεβαίως όλοι εσείς να ακούσουμε την διάλεξη του ευλογημότατου κυρίου καθηγητή. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Ευχαριστούμε τον κύριο Γενικό Πρόξενο για το χαιρετισμό του. Ο Σεβασμιότατος Αρχιεπίσκοπος Θυατείρων και Μεγάλης Βρετανίας, κύριος Γρηγόριος, θα παρουσιάσει τον κεντρικό ομιλητή της σημερινής εκδήλωσης, ευλογημότατο καθηγητή στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Cambridge, Fellow of Trinity College, κύριο Πέτρο Σαρή. Ο κύριος καθηγητής θα μιλήσει στα αγγλικά και μετά την ολοκλήρωση της ομιλίας θα απαντήσει σε κάποιες ερωτήσεις. Παρακαλώ οι ερωτήσεις να είναι σύντομες και σαφείς.
Πρώτα θα ήθελα να σας καλωσορίσω όλους στην απόψινή συγκέντρωση, να σας ευχηθώ όλους καλή χρονιά, ευλογημένη, ειρηνική και αποκατάσταση της οικονομικής ανισορροπίας που υπάρχει στον κόσμο και στην Ευρώπη, σύντομα με την προσπάθεια που κάνει η Ελλάδα και οι άλλες χώρες οι οποίες υφίστανται την κρίση αυτή. Εγώ θα χαιρετήσω αγγλικά με δύο λόγια, να καλωσορίσω τον ομιλητή, τον κύριο Πέτρο Σαρή, ο οποίος εδέχθη την πρόσκλησή μας να ομιλήσει απόψε στην εορτή των ελληνικών και χριστιανικών γραμμάτων. I am delighted to welcome you this evening to the annual celebration by the Archdiocese of Thyatira in Great Britain of the memory of the three holy hierarchs, Basil the Great, Gregory the Theologian, and John Chrysostom. The observance of this joint celebration of these three leading theologians and great fathers of the Church was crystallized in the Orthodox Church just over 1,000 years ago, and it considers them as patrons of learning, referring to them in its hymnography as being the three great torch-bearers of the triune Godhead, who have enlightened the world with the rays of their divine doctrines. Dr. Saris was born in 1971 in the beautiful cathedral city of St. Albans, where the imposing remains of the historic Roman city of Verulamium stands beside the sturdy, partly Norman church, today a cathedral, which before the Reformation enshrined the remains of England's proto-martyr, who gave his name to the town that developed around the building, and where the Orthodox Divine Liturgy is today celebrated regularly. I cannot but believe that this environment made a deep and lasting impression on the young Peter, and perhaps also played a role in developing his acute social sensitivity. He received his early education at St. Albans School, incidentally the only school in the English-speaking world to have educated a future Roman pontiff, in the person of Pope Hadrian IV. And he subsequently studied in Balliol College in Oxford, where he specialized in medieval and Byzantine history. Today, he is associated with Trinity College in Cambridge, where he is reader in Latin, in late Roman, medieval, and Byzantine history, being a fellow of the college and senior fellow in history. Since 2007, he has been a fellow of the Royal Historical Society. Among his publications, and there are many, are Economy and Society in the Age of Justinian, a translation of Procopius' the secret history. Procopius was the famous historian of the times of Justinian, with the introduction and notes being by him. The fall of Rome to the rise of Islam, eagerly awaited this year, is a volume entitled Byzantium, in the exceptionally useful series, a very short introduction. Needless to say, he has written a number of other books, is under contract for others, and has made numerous contributions to academic publication and journals. He has also lectured at universities throughout this country as well as in Europe and North America. Last year, 2014, he has elected as a Labour councillor for the East Chesterton ward of Cambridge City Council. Having been active in the Labour Party, the campaign of nuclear disarmament, and the anti-apartheid movement since his early years in St. Albans. I welcome you, him, and thank you very much. And I would ask him to address us on a subject which, for us Orthodox, Greek Orthodox Christians, is one of paramount importance, namely Orthodoxy, Hellenism, and Christian witness in the 21st century. Thank you.
Your Eminence, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin by saying what an enormous privilege it is to have been invited to address you this evening on the occasion of the Feast of the Three Holy Hierarchs. The celebration of the three doctors or teachers of the Church, as they are often described in the Western tradition, whose doctrines and instructions in the 4th and 5th centuries made a fundamental contribution to the formation of Christian orthodoxy as we understand it today. But I would like to begin by saying a few words about myself and where I come from to help you understand how I will be approaching my chosen topic of orthodoxy, Hellenism, and Christian witness in the 21st century. I am myself of mixed Greek Cypriot and British descent. My late father, Andreas Saris, came over here when he was 17 years old in the mid-1950s as a British colonial subject. And he came here to study accountancy and with a view to returning home to Cyprus. And he was, throughout his life, a proud Greek patriot and nationalist, himself the son of a schoolmaster, Kostas Saris, who was born sometime around the year 1905, he could never quite sure, in the village of Astromeridis, where he grew up before going off to study in Athens for a while, and who always regarded Cyprus as a constituent part of what used to be referred to as unredeemed Greece. Whilst over here, however, my father met my English mother, married her, and so stayed in the United Kingdom, although every holiday we had as a family had to be spent either in Cyprus or later in Greece. The one exception to this rule was that we were allowed to go on holiday to Cornwall in the southwest of England, but only because the rocky coastline and the turquoise sea of the Cornish peninsula reminded my father of his homeland. As a child, although I was baptized into Greek orthodoxy, was taught modern Greek by a tutor at home, the marvellous Nicky Smith, who certainly used to come to the centre a lot and maybe still does. And then I went on to learn ancient Greek at school. My mother tongue was English, and my relationship not only to Hellenism, but also as a result, to some extent, to Britishness, was as a result a rather semi-detached and sometimes oblique one. Certainly, it is easy to forget how much anti-Greek Cypriot feeling there was once amongst British people of a certain generation in this country, and how freely such people used to give vent to their hostility when they encountered people with Greek Cypriot connections. And remembering that meant that I always had a certain ambivalence at times towards aspects of British identity. Now, professionally, as has been mentioned, I am a historian. a historian primarily of the Roman, medieval, and Byzantine worlds. Within that very broad area, my work has primarily focused on the social and economic development of the Roman and Byzantine world from the age of Constantine the Great onwards, and also the historical background to the rise of Islam. Throughout my work, I've attempted to capture the voices and the life experiences of the urban poor, of the peasantry, of the artisans, whose taxes helped to support the Byzantine state and whose labours fueled the lifestyle of the Byzantine aristocracy, to whom I shall be returning. These historical interests chime with my more contemporary ones that His Eminence have already referred to. I have long been a socialist activist, and I'm currently, as was mentioned, a Labour Party city councillor in Cambridge. And in my lecture this evening, I propose to draw upon each of these three strands of identity, history, and politics to address my chosen theme. The Feast of the Three Holy Hierarchs has its origins, as most of you here will know, in the Byzantine Empire of the late 11th century, when the imperial church was engaged in a dispute as to which of the three great 4th century fathers of the church, Basil the Great, or Basil of Caesarea, Gregory the Theologian, or Gregory Nazianzus, or John Chrysostom, deserved to be credited with precedence and superiority. Basil the Great, as we have already heard, had made a fundamental contribution to the church. Firstly, through his contribution to the debate over Trinitarian doctrine, the relationship between the Father, the God, and the Holy Spirit within the Trinity. Secondly, through his role in giving shape, form, and coherence to the emergent monastic movement that would prove to be so central to the life of the Orthodox Church in the centuries ahead. And thirdly, through the intellectual and spiritual justification he gave for Christian students to continue to study classical Greek literature, which some within the church regarded as little more than the morally corrupting detritus of a now smashed pagan past. It was St. Basil in many ways, as we have heard, who facilitated and presided over the marriage of Greek and Christian letters that we celebrate today. Gregory the Theologian also made a fundamental contribution to the doctrinal development of the imperial church through his intervention in the Trinitarian disputes of the 4th century. Like Basil the Great, he sought to harness and marshal the inherited intellectual traditions of the ancient Greek world for the purposes of Christian faith. In his case, by deploying his philosophical training and his extraordinary rhetorical skills to give greater clarity of intellectual definition to the faith and blast his opponents. As my colleague Avril Cameron has noted, such patristic writings rate amongst the best surviving examples of the ancient Greek art of rhetoric in action. Along with the other so-called Cappadocian fathers, including Basil, Gregory also drew upon the uniquely rich tradition of speculative philosophy in Greek to construct a tradition of speculative theology that would be central to the Christological disputes in the centuries ahead, and the unique ability of the Church to enunciate the mysterious relationship between the human and divine in the person of Christ that was fundamental to a proper understanding of the economy of salvation. Again, a synergistic understanding, a synergistic relationship was established between otherwise potentially conflicting intellectual traditions, one that would prove to be central to the workings both of the Byzantine mind and the development of Orthodox spirituality. Lastly, John Chrysostom, who, like Gregory the Theologian, would serve ultimately as Patriarch of Constantinople, and was again, like Gregory, a great rhetorician, and like Basil, a great champion of monasticism and asceticism. St. John argued that the moral rigours of the monastic cell should inform the spiritual attitude and conduct of the laity. Like the later Roman pontiff, St. Gregory the Great, John Chrysostom sought to delineate the moral contours of a life that could be both active and contemplative, how to live morally in this world, in the world, and not just apart from it. Unlike Pope Gregory, however, this led John Chrysostom to sharp and public denunciations of the political, economic, and moral conduct of members of the imperial aristocracy, and even of the imperial household itself, leading to a politically fatal clash with the empress. Accordingly, a vital part of Chrysostom's great legacy to the Church would be a heightened sense of social criticism and a tradition of fearlessness in the face of authority, which in the West would be associated with the comparable and roughly contemporary figure of St. Ambrose. So given the issues with which they wrestled and the nature of their contribution, it is easy to see why subsequent generations of churchmen would find it so difficult to choose between and accord precedence amongst these three towering figures of the 4th century church, whose feast days each fell within the month of January. According to tradition, the issue was resolved in the year 1084, when all three of the holy hierarchs appeared in a vision before the famous bishop St. John Mavropoulos, declaring that they were equal before God and announcing there are no divisions among us and no opposition to one another. For crucially, each of these three great fathers of the Church, in different ways, was attempting to wrestle with specific issues and wrestle with specific challenges in the world in which they lived, issues and challenges which continued to resonate in 11th century Constantinople, and which, in differing ways and to differing degrees, I would like to suggest this evening, continue to resonate today. The first such issue was to do with the question of Christian witness in what had become an age of Christian empire. Christianity had begun as in many ways a deeply anti-institutional religion, one which advocated the casting off of ties of kindred, of property, and of political society as it would have been understood by the Greek mind. The Christian was meant to commit to selfless devotion to the divine in emulation of Christ. And such selflessness and such lack of ego could be most spectacularly achieved in the age of imperial persecution by suffering martyrdom for the sake of the faith, as St. Alban did in my native town. But with the adoption of Christianity by the Emperor Constantine in the year 312, with the ending of imperially sponsored persecution, and with the eventual establishment of Christianity as the official religion of the Roman state, the crown of the martyr slipped ever further from reach. How now were men and women to emulate Christ? It was this question that would, in a sense, serve to push to the fore of Christian life and practice the emergent tradition of Christian asceticism, as men and women increasingly responded to the spiritual message of the faith by effectively, in the words of the Western monastic rule of St. Benedict, making themselves their own persecutors, by engaging in mortification of the flesh and adopting regimes of ever greater physical and spiritual discipline and endeavour. But this phenomenon in turn then raised another question of where would charismatic authority come to reside within the Church? Would it come to reside with the non-ordained holy man or monk, whose ascetic endeavours increasingly captured the imagination of the laity? Or would it continue to reside with the traditional leaders of the Church, who are now increasingly looking like part of the imperial establishment? The Church leadership had to reconcile itself with, had to give coherence to, and ultimately had to embody the new movement, as we see it beginning to in the writings of Basil the Great, in the writings of St. John, and of course their contemporary, St. Athanasius of Alexandria. Second, as we have seen, the fathers of the Church were faced with the challenge of providing the Church with greater doctrinal clarity and reconciling potentially divergent intellectual traditions. This business in particular of providing greater doctrinal clarity was no easy matter. From its very earliest days, as the letters of St. Paul remind us, the Christian church had been characterized by a keen aspiration to unity on the part of the faithful, on which even pagan critics commented, alongside enormous disparities of actual belief. And this was a tension which the conversion of Constantine and the establishment of the church councils under imperial presidency had begun to offer some means of resolving, the first such council being that held at Nicaea in 325. And through such councils, the leaders of the church, epitomized by those we celebrate today, were able to initiate a process of theological dialectic whereby the issues of faith could be resolved. In terms of intellectual traditions, it was also vital that the church reconcile itself with, and again begin to embody, the Greek literary and philosophical tradition. For that tradition was so central to the personal identity and so central to the sense of selfhood of Greek-speaking members of the empire's governing classes, and was so central to their own sense of their humanity, that if the church failed to reconcile itself to the Greek intellectual tradition, it would never be able to draw enough such people within its embrace, or put down firm roots amongst them sufficient to prosper. Earlier, in the mid-4th century, the last pagan emperor, Julian, had attempted to make Greek literature an issue of sectarian dispute by trying to ban Christians from teaching it. This policy had been denounced even by pagan allies of the emperor, such as the professor of rhetoric in Antioch, Libanius, who would teach the young John Chrysostom. To men such as Libanius, or his contemporary and the historian and soldier Ammianus Marcellinus, also from Antioch, by politicizing the issue of Greek literature, the Emperor Julian had endangered its survival. Although such men were devoted to Julian, they were still more devoted to Homer. Julian had failed, but the church now had to prove itself to establish its credentials as an effective custodian of a precious intellectual heritage. And this again is something we see being worked out, especially in the writings of Basil the Great. But lastly, the church could not afford to become too comfortable or too at ease with the rich and the powerful, for fear that if it did so, it would lose its sense of mission and the great following it had built up across the 3rd century amongst many of the urban poor of the empire. For the Roman or Byzantine world in the age of the 3 holy hierarchs was one in which, it is quite clear, the rich were becoming richer as members of a new imperial aristocracy with political careers focused on the new capital of Constantinople, were using their newfound connections and wealth to build up massive estates and property portfolios at the expense of the peasantry and the poor. The great landowners and city councillors of Antioch, in particular, whence John Chrysostom originated, and where he did much of his early preaching, were especially notorious for the injustices they inflicted on their social inferiors. And these injustices, we should note, were a common theme of the holy man's sermons. In his homily on Job, for example, John Chrysostom paints a vivid picture of the lives of the peasants drawn onto the expanding estates of members of the Antiochian aristocracy, and the brutal treatment they received from estate managers acting on behalf of the landowners. In his remarkable series of sermons on the rich man and Lazarus, St. John compares the aristocracy of Antioch of his day to highway robbers and to thieves, advocating that they give their surplus wealth to the poor or suffer divine retribution in the afterlife. But for John, retribution could also come in this life. The city of Antioch, as one of the 4 largest cities of the Roman world, alongside Rome, Constantinople, and Alexandria, was especially prone to famine and hunger at times of poor harvest. And the historical sources reveal that it was common practice at such times of hunger for the local great landowners to seek to take advantage of this situation by hoarding grain in their private granaries so as to send its price on the open market skyrocketing, thereby allowing their agents to make massive profits at the expense of the starving poor of Antioch. In his 39th homily on St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, St. John goes so far as to express sympathy for the view that one landowner who was known to be guilty of such profiteering should be stoned to death. Now, in general, St. John advised the poor to demonstrate patient forbearance in the face of injustice. But it is clear that on this occasion, even he was minded to snap. But we should note the general point that the redistribution of surplus wealth from rich to poor was, as I say, a common theme of the future patriarch's sermons, a theme delivered in sermons presented to an increasingly unequal society. It appears, for example, this theme of redistribution in more than half of St. John's 90 homilies on St. Matthew's Gospel. Now, from the early 5th century, we possess in Latin a fascinating but alas anonymous Christian treatise on wealth, in which the author takes the remarkably radical and intellectually precocious position that poverty was a direct result of the existence of the rich. Get rid of the rich man, the anonymous author declares, and there will be no more poor. Now, this statement has recently been described by a great authority on Chrysostom, Professor Wolf Liebeschutz, as a concentrated version of the teaching that Chrysostom spread over his many sermons. But that is perhaps to slightly oversimplify St. John's views on wealth. Across the writings of the Church Fathers as a whole, it has been noted, a relatively clear but quite highly nuanced picture of wealth and the wealthy emerges. As my colleague Peter Haslam has put it, there are 4 chief elements in the teachings of the Fathers that are severely negative about the value of private wealth. First is the ultimately evil origin of wealth as represented by 7 of the Fathers. Irenaeus, Jerome, Chrysostom and Ambrose all agree that the beginning and root of wealth is to be found in some form of injustice, either on the part of the wealthy person themselves or on the part of the person or people from whom the wealth was gained or acquired, by inheritance or whatever. Chrysostom in particular added a measure of theological justification to his argument on this, insisting that wealth is evil because God, who is the ultimate owner of everything, has created all material goods to be held in common. To claim sole possession of any part of it, therefore, Chrysostom argued, is to be guilty of theft, both against God and against other human beings. Basil the Great is equally explicit, again calling robbers those who make their own things they had received to distribute, and again describing as robbers those who are able to clothe the naked but refuse to do so. That's in his homily on Luke. There emerges a line of teaching, Haslam has concluded, which may be considered a patristic antecedent to Proudhon's famous dictum that property is theft. We should also note the outright and clear condemnation of usury, especially by the Cappadocian Fathers. Moreover, in patristic tradition, the poor were often regarded as more favoured by God than the rich, and it was argued were to be identified with Christ. At the same time, however, the Fathers taught that the private ownership of property could be legitimised if such property was put to proper use. So, for example, in the same sermon in which John Chrysostom declares the root of all wealth to be injustice of some sort, he also argues that wealth is not evil in itself, so long as the rich do not hoard it for themselves, but share it with the poor, or to further the common good. Crucially, however, from the concept that all material possessions were meant to be commonly owned, and that the possession of private wealth by the few is therefore theft against the poor, there emerged in patristic thought the idea that when the rich give to the poor, this should be regarded as a matter of just redistribution rather than of charity. It is simply giving the poor their fair due, a matter of obligation rather than bounty. although at the same time it was agreed that there were moral benefits that would accrue to the wealthy by doing what they were meant to do. As I've indicated, this critique is relatively consistent across the writings of the Church Fathers, but was especially sharply expressed by Chrysostom, perhaps partly because of the violent nature of the disparities in wealth that he was seeing in his native Antioch, and the impact of those disparities on his city's population. Now, I stated earlier that the issues faced by the three holy hierarchs in the 4th century continued to resonate in Constantinople in the 11th century, and in various ways continue to resonate in our world today. The later Byzantine parallels I will pass over relatively quickly, you'll be relieved to hear, save to emphasize that the tensions between Greek thought and Christian faith that were such a theme in the 4th century were never really fully resolved to the satisfaction of all in the medieval period, and that there would always be hardline elements within the Church who would remain suspicious of elements of the inherited literary and philosophical traditions of Hellenism, or who believed all necessary knowledge to reside in Holy Scripture. Likewise, the Byzantine world would always generate intellectuals who, along with the 4th century Emperor Julian, would conclude that Homer was ultimately incompatible with Christ, but who would choose to follow Homer. So the main body of culture accepted the marriage of traditions established by Basil the Great, but there were always fringe elements on both sides that would not. It should also be noted that Byzantium, at the time when St. John Mavropoulos received his vision of the three holy hierarchs, was again a society in a profound sense of military, political, and social crisis. At the Battle of Manzikert, just 13 years earlier, the Byzantine authorities had suffered a devastating military defeat at the hands of the Seljuk Turks, whose power rapidly expanded over Western Asia Minor as the empire was consumed by civil strife. Soon, as a result, Constantinople would be home to disgruntled aristocrats, many of whom had lost their extensive estates to the east to the Turks, and whom the government of the Komnenian dynasty sought to bind into their regime by granting them extensive rights over the property, over the livelihoods, and over the persons of the free peasantry of the empire, from whom these aristocrats were now allowed to demand tribute and labour services. So began the great age of the quasi-feudal institution of the pronia, whereby the poor bore the brunt of the failings of the powerful. Which inevitably brings us to today. As we shall see shortly, certain of the issues faced by the three holy hierarchs of the 4th century are as alive today as they were then. There are others, however, which one wishes were perhaps rather more alive. As I suggested earlier, the first great issue facing the leaders of the Church in the 4th century was arguably how to deal with the institutionalization of the Church and the extent to which the age of the Great Persecution and the age of martyrdom had passed. By contrast, of course, we now live in an age in which the Church has found itself increasingly de-institutionalized and de-centered. But more significantly, it is a human tragedy of incalculable proportions that the 21st century should be associated not with the disappearance of direct suffering for faith, but instead with a new age of martyrdom and Christian witness. A new age of martyrdom and Christian witness that we see as the surviving Orthodox populations of Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere in the Near and Middle East find themselves subjected to vicious attack, to kidnap, and campaigns of murder at the hands of agents of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other extremist groups. Extremist groups often aided and abetted in their crimes, it shames me to say, by fanatical volunteers from Britain and supposed allies of the British state. The sufferings of the Orthodox and other ancient Christian families of the Near East have been the cause of constant pleas for help on the part of the Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch, as well as the ecumenical patriarchate of Constantinople and the papal authorities in Rome. Yet the atrocities committed against these Christians have often been effectively unreported in the British and other Western media, just as they were during the Iraq War, or continue to be in accounts of the situation in Israel and Palestine, where Christians once again have long suffered. The terrible and shocking plight of the Yazidis has been more fully reported in the British and Western press, I would suggest, partly because the treatment of non-Christian groups is regarded by often ill-informed journalists as less politically sensitive than the slaughter of Christians. In the spring of 2008, I had the great privilege to visit Syria and to witness the churches of Damascus and Aleppo preparing for Easter, the streets thronged at night with Christian school children, pristine in their school and other uniforms, preparing with great excitement for the festivities to come. Many of these children were, of course, Armenian descendants of an earlier cataclysm. It breaks my heart to think back to them or to ponder what fate may have befallen them. Now, the Church, as I have indicated, has spoken out on this, but members of the diaspora too must play their part in alerting their co-workers, their neighbours and their friends to what is going on, and in lobbying their political representatives to act. It should also be pointed out that it is very difficult to specifically channel financial aid to the Christian refugees and communities of Syria and Iraq without that aid passing through the hands of evangelical Protestant charities, whose agents undoubtedly provide much needed food and shelter, but whose intervention risks stripping the needy of their liturgy and traditions whilst alleviating their hunger. It must be made easier for us to give to these people in a way that helps preserve their identity and their faith, as well as their body and soul. Crucially, it is not only the Orthodox and Christian communities of Syria and Iraq to whom ISIS and related groups pose an existential threat. Naturally, the populations of the Lebanon and Jordan are highly at risk, and we have today seen the horrors in Egypt. But let nobody ignore the fact that should the region around Latakia and the Mediterranean coastline of Syria come under the control of the jihadists, it will only be a matter of time before they attempt to extend their reign of terror to Cyprus, targeting not just the British bases, but also potentially the general population as a whole, and using as a springboard for their murderous activities the illegal enclave of the self-styled Republic of Northern Cyprus, the leadership of which in the past has often had what could at best be described as an ambiguous relationship with religious extremists. Now, the Greek and Greek Orthodox communities of the region have always known that the secular governments of the Near and Middle East were not necessarily their friends. Although individuals of Greek Orthodox origin played a vital role in anti-colonial and secular nationalist movements in Syria, in Iraq, and in Palestine in the 1950s and 60s, for example, it was, of course, the Greeks of Alexandria who first bore the full brunt of General Nasser and his nationalists in Egypt. And the fate of the final remnants of the Greek community there remains a cause of great sadness. As a boy, I was fortunate enough to know a remarkable lady by the name of Sula Kalau, a refugee from Smyrna who grew up in Alexandria before marrying a British naval officer and migrating to Paris and London, and who, like so many of the Alexandrians, seemed to speak every language known to mankind. She was a precious connection to a world now lost. At the same time, we know that men of faith, sincerely committed to religions other than our own, are not necessarily our enemies, and that there is much, for example, on which pious Muslims and the pious Orthodox have often agreed upon or held in common. Whilst travelling through northeastern Turkey a couple of years ago, for example, the Turkish guide with whom I was working and I met an imam in the city of Kars, who had been entrusted with the care of a mosque there, which had once been an exquisite Armenian church. Within the mosque, the Imam showed us an area that he had set aside where Christian visitors could pray. And in a modest and gentle tone, he explained to us how he had taught the local children that Muslims, Christians and Jews were all sons of Abraham and worshipped the same God. My Turkish colleague and I were equally moved. Rather, amid the present troubles which the world and the region faces, Greeks and the Greek Orthodox have a vital role to play and a vital contribution to make. By virtue of many centuries of contact with the Islamic world, we are in a unique position to reject the ahistorical simple-mindedness of those evangelical fundamentalists and others in the West who deny there can be any coexistence between Muslim and non-Muslim, whilst also gainsaying the equally dangerous and gainsaying the equally historically ignorant claim of those secular and other liberals who sometimes simply assert that all religions are the same, and who thus fail to appreciate what it is about the form of radical Islam preached by the followers of ISIS that strikes many sympathizers as authentic and thus appealing. Historically, one of the great contributions of Greek thought to the Western mind was a particular mode of informed, rational analysis. It is an intellectual inheritance that too many policymakers today appear to have lost. We need to remind them of that as a matter of pressing urgency. Of the other challenges faced by the fathers of the Church in general, and the three holy hierarchs in particular, the intellectual tension between Hellenism and Orthodoxy, once more, is not what it was, although the nature of the relationship between the Hellenic state and the Orthodox Church is one which may become more prominent in political discourse by virtue of recent events. Rather, the intellectual tradition for the Church today is much more that of how to reconcile its traditions with current advances in science, technology, and especially the life sciences, which in certain respects are coming to challenge inherited concepts of identity and personhood. But this is a challenge for all the Christian churches, and the Orthodox Church, with its highly developed concept of stewardship and of harmonious and responsible coexistence with creation, has responded far more positively and creatively to the environmental challenges that we face than has any other tradition. A carefully worked out ecological theology, drawing upon the traditions of the Church, has, in short, been one of the great achievements of orthodoxy in the 21st century, one to which the ecumenical patriarchate has made a fundamental contribution. It is, however, with respect to questions of wealth and poverty, that the parallels between the age of the three holy hierarchs and our own are at their most pressing. A fact that inevitably raises the issue of the current economic crisis, of the new Greek government, which has already been floated in a sense, and its relationship potentially with the Church. Now, nobody should expect relations between the new government and the leadership of the Church to be easy. As I've just indicated, there are likely to be tensions, in particular over the constitutional position of the Church, as well as the fiscal status of its landholdings. In other words, dialogue is likely to be dogged by the same sorts of issues that have long problematized relations between the Orthodox Church and the Greek left. Just as historical memories of the inevitable institutional role played by the Church in the Ottoman Empire long informed a tradition of ambivalence, of scepticism, or sometimes of outright anti-clericalism on the part of moderately right-wing Greek nationalists of, say, my grandfather's generation. Now, I have sometimes heard it suggested that relations between the Greek left and the Church have perhaps been particularly problematized by the comparative weakness in the modern Greek world of what, in a British context, would be understood as a tradition of Christian socialism. I remember the anthropologist of Mediterranean society and former warden at All Souls College in Oxford, John Davis, how he used to quiz me on why it was that there was not really a Christian socialist tradition within Greek Orthodoxy, in the same way that there was, say, within the Church of England. In doing so, of course, Davis perhaps fell prey to the intellectual conceit so common to Englishmen of taking English history as the standard and norm and asking the rest of the world to account for how they could possibly have been so perverse as to deviate from it. Rather, it is the development of English or British Christian socialism that we should probably regard as the historical anomaly, the result of a very particular chronology and experience of industrialisation on the part of the British working class communities, and a particular type of intellectual response to that same process by members of a socially concerned clergy. So dialogue with the new government and the church will never be easy, but it may also not be quite as difficult as many might assume. The great suffering and hardship endured by so many of the Greek people in recent years, and the enormous efforts of the church in helping the poor and needy, have already served to draw people together to at least some extent. Ultimately, what the current national crisis demands above all else is unity, and that unity can best be achieved by emphasising what, beyond a shared patriotism, church and government have in common. Such common ground, I would suggest, may perhaps be most easily identified if we return to the tradition of the three holy hierarchs, and in particular the homilectic tradition of St. John Chrysostom, whose fearless critiques of the extravagance of the wealthy, whose furious denunciation of the abuses of the mighty, and whose careful condemnation of the self-seeking materialism of the oligarchs and elites of his own era speak to us as vividly today as they did to his congregations in the 4th century. Left or right, secularist or orthodox, amid the current crisis, the writings of Chrysostom can provide a common platform on which to stand. John's Antioch is today's Athens. In the writings and sermons of St. John Chrysostom, moreover, we hear not only a cogent analysis of the excesses of the super-rich, as relevant today as when the words were first flowed from his lips or fell from his pen, but also a clear moral argument to present to those who claim to be Greece's creditors, and who assert that alleviating Greek national debt would in some sense to be to allow the Greek people off a hook of their own making. We all know, of course, that those responsible for the economic catastrophe that has befallen Greece and indeed Cyprus are not those who are currently paying the price of it through unemployment, through poverty, or through hardship. Much of the international bailout has largely been used to refill the coffers of those very same private financial institutions, often in Germany and elsewhere, whose activities helped to fuel the crisis in the first place. Whilst many of the tax-shy oligarchs who also helped summon the financial storm have simply shifted themselves and their fortunes to London and elsewhere. But even if, as in Germany in the late 1940s and early 1950s, a significant proportion of the Greek population were directly responsible in some sense for the cataclysm that has befallen the nation, would the rational response really be to impose upon them massive debt and punitive reparations? Would the Christian response be to do so? And many of Greece's shrillest critics, after all, identify themselves as Christian Democrats. The message from both history and from the writings of St. John Chrysostom are clear. As was noted in the Guardian newspaper just last week, the response of the Allied powers in the early 1950s was not to hold the German people responsible for the financial bankruptcy and economic devastation of their state. Rather, it was to cancel the debt and rebuild the country. No nation has received a greater financial bailout than Germany. Without the bailout provided by the Marshall Plan to a starving Germany, there would have been no German economic miracle and perhaps no European post-war recovery. Crucially, it is a policy of which St. John would undoubtedly have approved. As he warns the super-rich of Antioch in his second sermon on Lazarus and the rich man, the poor man has just one plea, the fact of his hunger and his standing in need. do not require from him anything else. But even if he is the most wicked of all men, and is at a loss for his necessary sustenance, let us free him from hunger. It worked for Germany, let it work for Greece. In the year 1084, as I mentioned at the start of this lecture, the three holy hierarchs were reported to have appeared before St. John Mavropous and to declare to him, "There are no divisions among us and no opposition to one another." Now, one cannot imagine three Greek politicians gathered in a room ever being able to say that. But amid the current crisis, irrespective of politics, let all remember that those at fault are not the poor, but the rich, not the debtors, but the creditors. And let us also remember that within the writings preserved from the three holy hierarchs, we inherit the basis of a humane analysis of the world in which we live today, one which is at once profoundly Greek, profoundly orthodox, but also profoundly universalist, speaking to the human needs of all suffering mankind. Let them speak to us as they spoke to their contemporaries. I shall finish there.
Στη συνέχεια, η χοροδία της Σχολής Βυζαντινής Μουσικής της Αρχιεπισκοπής θα αποδώσει ακόμη μερικούς ύμνους από το πλούσιο υμνολόγιο της Εκκλησίας μας, με θέμα τους τρεις μεγάλους πατέρες και οικουμενικούς διδασκάλους.
Oh
Ευχαριστούμε θερμά τον κύριο των Εμπειρίων, τόσο τους χορευτές, όσο και την πρόεδρο του κυρία Αρχιεπισκοπή και την ευγενική της κοινωνία να εμπλουτίσουν την ακουστική μας εκδήλωση με τους γεμάτους χάρη και ζωντάνιους χορούς. Σεβασμιότατε, εντιμότατη, ευλογημότατη κύριε καθηγητά, αξιώνυμοι προσκεκλημένοι, φτάσαμε στο τέλος της απόψινής μας εκδήλωσης. Θερμές ευχαριστίες προς όλους τους συμμετέχοντες και προς όλους τους παρευρισκόμενους. Θα ακολουθήσει η δεξίωση σε όλη την πρόσδεκτη.